The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Route 17, painting the horizon in streaks of orange and crimson, as if the sky itself were bleeding out from some unseen wound. In the shadow of a weathered gas station, where the air smelled of stale oil and distant rain, a small boy stood rigid, his tiny hand pressed to his forehead in a salute sharper than any soldier's. He couldn't have been more than 8, his clothes threadbare and dusted with the grit of too many miles, walked alone. His name was Ethan, and every time the rumble of engines echoed down the highway, he'd snap to attention, eyes wide with a fierce, unspoken hope. But today, as a lone rider thundered past without a glance, Ethan's shoulders slumped, and a single tear carved a clean line through the dirt on his cheek. No one stopped. No one ever did. It had started months ago, after the accident that stole his father. Jake Harlan had been a mechanic, hands calloused from years of wrenching on Harleys in the dim glow of garage lights. But he'd ridden with the Iron Vipers back in his wilder days, a crew of outcasts bound by oaths sworn over campfires and cold beers. Jake's promise to his son was simple. "One day, kid, we'll ride together. You and me, against the wind." But the wind had turned cruel that rainy night, claiming Jake in a twist of fate on the same road Ethan now haunted. Left with an aunt who barely looked at him, and a town that whispered pity, Ethan clung to that memory like a lifeline. Every biker who passed became a ghost of his father, deserving of the salute Jake had taught him, one that said loyalty didn't fade, even in the face of loss. The gas station attendant, a grizzled man named Roy, with a perpetual squint from too many sunsets, watched from behind the counter. He'd seen the boy every afternoon for weeks, standing there like a sentinel amid the pumps and faded soda signs. "Kid's gonna get himself run over one day," Roy muttered to no one, wiping down a sticky counter that reeked of spilled coffee. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. Ethan's eyes held a quiet storm, the kind that brewed from promises unkept and a world that moved on too fast. Roy had lost a brother to the roads years back, so he slipped the boy free sodas sometimes, but words, they stuck in his throat like gravel. As dusk crept in, casting long shadows that danced like spectres across the lot, the first real rumble of the evening approached. Not a single bike, but a pack. Noah Kane led them, his broad frame cutting through the twilight on a blacked-out Indian chief, the engine's growl a low thunder that vibrated through the earth. Noah was the reluctant enforcer of the Vipers, a man scarred by wars he'd left behind in dusty foreign lands, where promises to fallen brothers had etched lines into his face deeper than any tattoo. At 42, with silver threading his beard and a viper patch worn thin on his leather vest, he'd sworn off the old life after Jake's death pulled him back in. Jake had been his sergeant once, the one who dragged Noah from the brink during a firefight that still haunted his dreams. The acrid smoke, the screams cut short. "You owe me one, Kane," Jake had growled back then, glapping his shoulder with bloodied hands. "Watch my boy if I don't make it home." Noah hadn't planned on riding this way tonight. The Vipers were scattered these days, chasing jobs in oil fields and construction sites, their once tight brotherhood frayed by time and regrets. But a wrong turn off the interstate, chasing the ghost of a memory, brought him here. He spotted the boy first, a small figure snapping to salute as the convoy crested the rise. Noah's hand instinctively rose to his brow in return, a reflex from barracks long gone. The bikes behind him, 10 strong, their chrome glinting like fangs in the fading light, slowed as one, a ripple of curiosity passing through the pack. "What's with the kid?" called Marcus, Noah's second, a burly ex-marine with a laugh like grinding gears. They pulled into the lot, engines cutting off one by one until silence fell, heavy as a shroud. Ethan didn't move, his salute unwavering, chest puffed out against the chill wind that whispered through the pumps. Noah dismounted first, boots crunching on loose gravel, the scent of leather and exhaust clinging to him like an old friend. Up close, the boy looked even smaller, his face a map of quiet defiance, eyes the color of storm clouds. "Hey, son," Noah said, voice rough but gentle, crouching to meet his gaze. "You saluting us like we're heroes or something?" Ethan's hand finally dropped, but his chin lifted. "My dad did. He rode with guys like you, said promises keep you going, even when everything else breaks." The words hung in the air, simple and shattering, stirring something deep in Noah's gut, an echo of Jake's voice, of oaths sworn under starless skies. The other bikers gathered, a circle of weathered faces and inked arms, murmuring among themselves. Roy emerged from the station, arms crossed, watching as if this were the start of some old Western showdown. Noah felt the weight of it then. The pull of that forgotten debt. He'd buried Jake's memory under miles of road, but here it was, staring back at him in a child's unblinking eyes. "What's your name, kid?" Noah asked, though a part of him already knew. "Ethan Harlan," the boy replied, voice steady. "And Dad said the Vipers never forget." Noah's breath caught, the pieces slamming together like a puzzle he'd avoided for too long. Harlan, Jake's boy. The convoy shifted uneasily, sensing the shift in their leader's stance. Marcus leaned in, whispering, "Boss, this the one from the letter, the promise." Noah nodded slowly, the desert wind tugging at his vest. He'd received that scrawled note months back, Jake's last words smuggled through a mutual friend. "If I go down, promise you'll look after Ethan. Make sure he knows what family means." Noah had folded it away, telling himself life moved on. But promises, like the roads they rode, had a way of circling back. That night, as stars pierced the velvet sky and the bikers shared stories around a makeshift fire in the lot, crackling flames casting flickering shadows on their faces, Noah made his choice. "We're not leaving him here alone," he declared, voice cutting through the murmurs. The crew nodded, bonds rekindling like embers fanned to life. Ethan sat among them, wide-eyed, as tales of Jake unfolded. The midnight rides through canyons, the stands against crooked sheriffs who'd tried to break the club. It wasn't just a story, it was a vow renewed. By dawn, the first light gilding the bikes in gold, Noah knelt before Ethan one last time. "Your dad's promise, it's ours now. We'll ride for him, and for you." The boy nodded, a spark of hope igniting in his eyes, the kind that could outlast any storm. As the engines roared to life, Ethan saluted again, but this time every Viper returned it, a thunderous wave of fists to brows. The convoy pulled out, dust swirling in their wake, heading toward a town where shadows of the past waited to be confronted. Little did they know, this ride would test every oath, weaving a tapestry of loyalty that would bind them tighter than blood. And if this tale of quiet courage stirs something in you, drop a comment below. Tell us where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. These roads of redemption stretch far, and we want to hear how they echo in your world. The convoy thundered down Route 17 like a living beast, engines harmonizing in a deep, resonant growl that shook the morning mist from the sagebrush lining the road. Noah Kane rode point, his Indian chief slicing through the cool dawn air, the scent of dew-kissed earth mingling with the sharp tang of exhaust. Ethan clung to the back of his bike, small arms wrapped tight around Noah's waist, his cheek pressed against the worn leather vest that still carried faint traces of campfire smoke from the night before. The boy's heart pounded in rhythm with the pistons, a mix of fear and exhilaration chasing away the chill. Behind them, the Vipers stretched out in formation, Marcus on his rumbling shovelhead, flanked by the others, their silhouettes dark against the rising sun, chrome accents flashing like signals of intent. They'd left the gas station at first light, Roy waving from the pumps with a nod that spoke volumes unspoken. The old attendant had slipped Noah a thermos of black coffee and a quiet warning. "Town's got eyes, Kane. Ethan's aunt ain't the forgiving type. She'll call in favors if you stir the pot." Noah had grunted in response, but the words lodged like gravel in his boot. Promises were one thing. The real world had teeth, especially in a place like Willow Creek, where small-town grudges festered longer than rust on a forgotten frame. As the miles blurred by, endless stretches of cracked blacktop flanked by jagged hills that rose like silent guardians, the crew fell into an easy silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of a CB radio. Ethan lifted his head occasionally, stealing glances at the horizon, his mind replaying the stories from the fire. How Jake had once led a midnight run to deliver supplies to a stranded family during a blizzard, defying a storm that swallowed lesser men. "Your dad was the glue," Marcus had said, his voice gravelly over the flames. "Held us when the world tried to tear us apart." The boy felt a swell in his chest, not quite pride, but something warmer, a belonging that had eluded him since the accident. Willow Creek came into view by mid-morning, a cluster of weathered buildings huddled against the wind-swept plains, the kind of town where secrets hid behind lace curtains and faded diner signs. The main street was quiet, save for a few locals pausing in their routines to stare at the approaching thunder. Noah signaled the pull-off near the old hardware store, engines winding down to a hush that amplified the distant hum of a chainsaw from somewhere in the hills. Dismounting, he helped Ethan to the ground, the boy's legs wobbly from the ride, but his eyes alight with determination. "This is home?" Noah asked, scanning the row of squat houses with peeling paint, the air thick with the aroma of fresh-baked bread from a nearby bakery, warring with the underlying mustiness of neglect. Ethan nodded, pointing to a sagging porch 2 blocks down. "Aunt Clara's place. She said I was a burden after Dad." "After?" His voice trailed off, but the weight hung heavy. Clara Harlan, Jake's estranged sister, had taken the boy in out of obligation, not love. Her life a tangle of unpaid bills and a job at the local mill that left her hollow-eyed and short-tempered. Whispers in town painted her as bitter, blaming Jake's reckless ways for the family's fall. Though truth was, she'd turned her back long before the roads claimed him. The Vipers fanned out, leaning against their bikes like statues carved from leather and steel, drawing wary glances from passers-by. A sheriff's cruiser idled at the corner, its occupant, a stocky deputy with a mustache like tangled wire, stepping out to adjust his hat, eyes narrowing at the intrusion. Noah felt the familiar prickle of tension, the kind that came from too many run-ins with badges that bent for the highest bidder. But this wasn't about confrontation. It was about honoring a word given in the heat of battle, under skies far from here. They walked the short distance as a group, boots echoing on the uneven sidewalk, the sun climbing higher to bake the dust into the air. Ethan led, his small frame straight-backed, saluting a passing trucker out of habit. At the porch steps, the door creaked open before they could knock. Clara stood there, arms crossed over a faded apron, her face a mask of surprise, hardening into suspicion. She was in her late 30s, lines etched deep from years of scraping by, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Ethan, what in the world? Who are these men?" Her gaze flicked over the bikers, voice sharpening like a blade on whetstone. "Aunt Clara," Ethan started, but Noah stepped forward, removing his aviators to reveal eyes shadowed by old ghosts. "Ma'am, name's Noah Kane. I rode with your brother Jake. He left a message for me about the boy." He pulled the crumpled letter from his vest pocket, the paper yellowed but the ink bold. Jake's scrawl promising protection, family beyond blood. Clara's expression cracked, a flicker of something, regret perhaps, crossing her features before defensiveness walled it off. "Jake's gone, and so's his trouble. I can't keep him. The state's sniffing around already, talking placements. You think a bunch of road warriors can fix that?" Her words were barbed, but beneath them, Noah caught the tremor, the exhaustion of a woman who'd shouldered more than her share. The deputy arrived then, cruiser pulling up with lights flashing silently, adding to the growing knot of onlookers. "Everything all right here, Ms. Harlan?" he called, hand resting casually on his belt, though his stare bored into Noah like he was sizing up a threat. Noah kept his stance easy, hands visible. "Just family business, deputy, no trouble." But inside, the gears turned. This wasn't just about Ethan. It was a web of old debts, Jake's unresolved ties to the town, rumors of a land deal gone sour, a crooked official who'd profited while Jake paid the price. The Vipers shifted subtly, a united front that spoke of loyalty forged in fire. Ethan looked up at Noah, his small hand slipping into the biker's calloused one. In that touch, a silent vow passed. They wouldn't leave without a fight, not the kind with fists, but the deeper battle for what was right. Clara watched, her resolve wavering as the morning light caught the viper patches, symbols of a brotherhood that remembered. The air grew thick with unspoken histories, the promise pulling them all toward an reckoning that would test the bonds of chosen kin. As the group stood there, the weight of the moment settling like dust after a storm, Marcus murmured to Noah, "Boss, this town's got shadows longer than the road." Jake's letter mentioned something about a debt owed to the club from someone high up. Noah nodded, the pieces aligning. Willow Creek wasn't just a stop, it was ground zero for redemption, where oaths would clash with corruption and a boy's salute might just rally an army of the heart. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The deputy's boots scraped against the cracked sidewalk as he approached, his shadow stretching long across the porch, like a warning etched in midday sun. Willow Creek's air hung heavy now, laced with the faint bitterness of overheated asphalt and the underlying rot of secrets long buried. Noah Kane stood firm, his hand still clasped around Ethan's small one, the boy's fingers trembling not from fear, but from the quiet resolve that mirrored his father's unyielding spirit. The Vipers formed a loose semicircle behind them, their presence a silent thunder, leather creaking softly, eyes steady under the brims of weathered caps. Marcus shifted his weight, arms crossed over his broad chest, the ink of an old viper emblem peeking from his sleeve like a badge of forgotten wars. Family business, you say? The deputy, Badge Harlan, as his tarnished nameplate read, no relation to the Harlans, but wearing the town's authority like a ill-fitting coat, eyed Noah with the practiced suspicion of a man who'd chased shadows for too long. His mustache twitched, and the radio on his belt crackled faintly, a reminder of the thin line between order and overreach. "This town's seen enough of your kind rolling through, stirring up dust and trouble. Ms. Harlan here has custody, legal and clear. You got papers or just good intentions?" Clara stepped forward, her apron twisting in her hands, the fabric worn thin from too many washes in a life of quiet desperation. Her eyes darted from the deputy to Noah, then down to Ethan, who met her gaze without flinching. "They're friends of Jake's," she said, her voice a fragile bridge between defensiveness and doubt. "But the boy's staying put. Social services is coming tomorrow. Placement in a group home upstate. It's for the best. Jake's ways, they don't leave room for normal." Ethan's grip tightened in Noah's hand, a small anchor against the tide of words that threatened to sweep him away. The boy had heard the arguments before, whispered through thin walls at night. How Clara's resentment toward Jake stemmed from a shared childhood, scarred by their father's gambling debts. How she'd cut ties when Jake joined the Vipers, calling it a path to ruin. But Ethan knew better. His dad had sent money when he could, fixed her car in the dead of night without a word. Promises weren't always loud. Sometimes they were the quiet turn of a wrench under a hood. Noah released Ethan's hand gently, stepping closer to Clara, his voice low and steady, carrying the gravel of roads traveled and battles survived. Ma'am, Jake didn't just ride with us, he saved us, pulled me from a ditch in the sand overseas when the world was exploding around us, said, "Cain, you watch my 6, I'll watch yours." That letter, it's his last 6 for the boy. He extended the paper again, the edges frayed like the edges of his own patience. Clara hesitated, her fingers brushing it before pulling back as if burned. The words blurred in the sunlight. Jake's hasty script, inked in the hours before that fatal ride, pleading for the club to stand as family when blood failed. Badge Harlan snorted, adjusting his belt with a jingle of keys that echoed like judgment. Sentimental hogwash. This ain't some biker ballad. Kids' welfare's my concern, and you lot look like trouble on 2 wheels. Clear out, or I'll radio for backup. His hand hovered near his holster, a gesture more bluff than threat, but it rippled through the vipers like wind over embers. Marcus's jaw clenched, and a low murmur passed among the crew, reminders of past badges that had twisted justice for personal gain. Like the time in Dustville, when a sheriff shook down Jake for protecting a widow's farm from a greedy developer. But Noah raised a hand, stilling them. Violence wasn't the Viper way anymore. It was the shadow they'd outrun. This fight would be won with truth, the kind that exposed rot without drawing blood. "Deputy, you knew Jake. Rode by his garage plenty. He ever mentioned the land deal? The one where the mill owner, your cousin if memory serves, pushed him out after that storm washed the creek bed." Noah's eyes locked on Badge's, probing the flicker of unease. Whispers from Jake's old contacts had trickled in over the CB that morning. How the accident wasn't just fate, but a loose guardrail ignored by the county, one tied to bribes that lined pockets while roads crumbled. Clara's face paled, the pieces she'd ignored for months snapping into focus. "What are you saying? Jake's crash. It was the rain, the speed." But her voice wavered, the denial cracking under the weight of Noah's steady gaze. Ethan looked up at her, his small voice cutting through the tension like a clear bell. "Dad said you were family once, Aunt Clara. Before everything. He fixed things quiet, like he fixed bikes. Maybe we can too." The deputy shifted, sweat beading on his brow despite the breeze picking up, carrying the distant scent of pine from the hills. Onlookers had gathered now, a cluster of townsfolk at the edge of the street, murmuring behind hands, the bakery owner pausing with a tray of cooling loaves. Willow Creek thrived on gossip, but this was different, a reckoning, the past roaring back on chrome and leather. Badge cleared his throat, glancing at his cruiser. "This is hearsay. You want to talk deals? Take it to the station. But the boy's not going anywhere with you without a judge's say." Noah nodded, the concession a tactical pause. "Fair enough, but we're not leaving town till this is square. Jake's promise includes setting things right, for Ethan, for you, for whatever shadows this place hides." He turned to the Vipers, signaling with a subtle tilt of his head. They mounted up slowly, engines coughing to life in a staggered symphony that vibrated through the porch boards. Ethan climbed back onto Noah's bike, his salute to Clara brief but sincere, a gesture of hope amid the fracture. As the convoy pulled away, dust swirling in lazy spirals that caught the sun like fleeting gold, Clara watched from the steps, the letter clutched in her fist. The deputy's cruiser followed at a distance, taillights winking like wary eyes. Noah felt the road ahead fork, not just asphalt, but paths of loyalty tested, truths unearthed. The Vipers rode toward the old mill on the outskirts, where Jake's final grudge lingered in rusted silos and forgotten ledgers. There, amid the creak of machinery and the hush of overgrown weeds, they'd dig for the evidence Jake had hinted at. Documents buried like time capsules, proof of corruption that had cost a good man his life. Ethan leaned forward, his voice barely audible over the wind. "They'll listen now, right? Like Dad always said, truth rides straight." Noah glanced back, the boy's eyes reflecting the endless sky. "Yeah, kid, straight and true, and we've got the whole crew to back it." The miles unspooled, carrying them deeper into the heart of Willow Creek's hidden wounds, where redemption waited not in grand gestures, but in the quiet honor of keeping one's word. The sun climbed higher, casting their shadows long and united, a promise etched against the horizon. The old mill loomed on the edge of Willow Creek like a forgotten sentinel, its silos thrusting skyward against a sky now bruised with gathering clouds, the air thick with the metallic tang of rust and the faint acrid whisper of long-extinguished forges. Noah Kane eased his Indian chief to a stop at the chain-link fence, the engine's rumble fading into the hush of overgrown weeds that swayed like ghosts in the breeze. Ethan slid off the bike, his sneakers sinking into the soft earth, eyes wide as he took in the skeletal structure, rusted beams groaning under their own weight, windows shattered like broken promises. The Vipers dismounted behind them, a disciplined pack, moving with the quiet efficiency of men who'd faced worse than decay. The creak of leather, the soft clink of tools from saddlebags, the shared glances that spoke of oaths renewed. Marcus led the way, clipping the fence with bolt cutters that snapped like brittle bones, his shovelhead parked nearby as a lookout. "Jake mentioned a lockbox in the foreman's office," he said, voice low, pulling a faded map from his vest, yellowed paper marked with Jake's precise notations, arrows pointing to hidden corners. "Said it held the receipts, the ones that proved the county skimmed funds for road repairs. That guardrail? Cut corners to line pockets." Noah nodded, the weight of it settling deeper. Jake hadn't just died in an accident. He'd been erased by greed, the kind that festered in small towns where power wore a badge or a suit. They slipped through the gap, boots crunching over gravel strewn with shards of glass that glinted like scattered teeth in the dappled light, filtering through the canopy of twisted vines. Ethan stayed close to Noah, his small hand brushing the biker's leg, a silent tether amid the eerie quiet, broken only by the distant caw of crows circling the silos. The mill's interior swallowed them whole, vast halls echoing with their footsteps, the air heavy with dust motes dancing in shafts of sunlight, carrying the musty scent of damp wood and faded ink. Shadows pooled in corners where machinery lay dormant, hulking shapes that could hide more than memories, perhaps the very evidence that could rewrite Ethan's future. In the foreman's office, a cramped room off the main floor, they pried open a warped desk drawer with a crowbar, the wood splintering with a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot. Papers spilled out, bills of lading, faded invoices, but no lockbox. Marcus cursed under his breath, wiping sweat from his brow, the room's stale heat pressing in like an unwelcome guest. He said under the floorboards near the window. Noah knelt, prying at the loose planks with scarred knuckles, the nails giving way with reluctant squeals. Ethan watched, heart pounding, imagining his father here in secret, squirreling away truths while the town turned blind eyes. The box emerged coated in grime, a dented metal case that thudded heavily onto the desk. Noah's hands trembled slightly as he worked the combination. Jake's birthday, etched in memory from shared rides under starlit skies. Inside lay the proof. Ledgers yellowed with age, receipts stamped with official seals, notations in Jake's hand linking mill owner Victor Lang, a slick operator with ties to the county commissioners, to diverted funds. "Look here," Noah murmured, tracing a line with his finger. 10 grand for road maintenance that never happened. The guardrail was rusted through because of this. Ethan's eyes scanned the pages, too young to grasp the full betrayal, but feeling its chill, the way it twisted his father's memory into something tainted by others' sins. Outside, the growl of engines announced company, the deputy's cruiser, followed by a dusty sedan that screamed authority. Victor Lang stepped out first, a paunchy man in his 50s with a tailored shirt straining at the seams, his face flushed under a wide-brimmed hat. Badge Harlan flanked him, hand on his radio, while Clara trailed behind, her expressionless storm of conflict, arms wrapped tight around herself as if holding back the flood of regrets. "Heard you boys were poking around," Victor called, his voice oily smooth, stepping through the fence with feigned casualness. "Private property. Trespassing's a fine way to spend the afternoon." Noah straightened, the lockbox tucked under his arm, the Vipers closing ranks instinctively, a wall of resolve, their shadows merging in the afternoon light slanting through the mill's broken roof. Ethan pressed against Noah's side, but his chin lifted, the salute his father taught him burning in his chest like a quiet fire. "This is about Dad," the boy said, voice steady despite the quiver in his limbs. "He found out what you did, the money that should have fixed the roads." Victor's laugh was forced, echoing hollowly off the silos, but his eyes darted to the box, recognition flickering like a shorted wire. Kid's got an imagination. Jake was always stirring pots. Good riddance to his meddling. Clara stepped forward then, her face pale, the letter from Jake crumpled in her pocket like a talisman. "I came because Ethan deserves better than lies. Jake wrote to me too before, said the mill deal ruined us all. Your greed, Victor, pushing him into that last ride to clear debts." Her words hung in the air, a fracture in the facade, born from nights of staring at the ceiling, piecing together the fragments of family, fractured by ambition. Badge shifted uneasily, his bluff cracking under the weight of witnesses, the Vipers standing silent but unyielding, their loyalty a force as tangible as the dust swirling at their feet. "This is slander," he barked, but Noah held up a ledger page, the ink stark against the yellowed paper. "Slander's what killed Jake. Call your judge, deputy, but the truth, it rides with us now." The standoff stretched, tension coiling like a spring, the wind picking up to rattle the loose chains on the fence, carrying the faint scent of impending rain, a cleansing perhaps for wounds long ignored. Clara knelt beside Ethan, her hand finally reaching for his, the touch tentative but real. "I was wrong, kid. Family's not just blood, it's the ones who show up." Victor's face darkened, backing toward his car as the deputy radioed for confirmation, the static crackling like nerves frayed. Noah felt the shift, the moral tide turning not through force, but through the unyielding honor of a promise kept. The evidence in hand was more than paper. It was Jake's legacy, a beacon against corruption's shadow. As the first drops fell, pattering softly on the mill's tin roof like hesitant applause, the group moved as one, Vipers escorting Clara and Ethan toward the bikes, the deputy trailing with reluctant sirens silent. Willow Creek's secrets were unraveling, thread by thread, pulling them toward a justice that honored the fallen. Noah glanced at Ethan, the boy's eyes reflecting the storm clouds, a spark of redemption igniting. Promises, once buried, now roared to life, binding them in a family forged from the road's unyielding truth. If this chapter's glimpse into hidden truths touched your heart, smash that like button. It helps these stories of honor and redemption reach more souls in need. The rain came down in earnest now, a relentless sheet that hammered the mill's rusted roof like 1,000 impatient fingers, turning the ground into a slick mire of mud and regret. Noah Kane shielded the lockbox under his vest, the metal cool against his skin, despite the warmth of the gathering storm, as the Vipers hustled Clara and Ethan toward the bikes. Water streamed down their faces, mixing with the dust to carve clean paths through the grime of the afternoon's revelations. Ethan's small frame shivered against Noah's side, but his eyes burned with a clarity that cut through the downpour, the kind of unyielding light that came from seeing truth emerge from shadows long enough. Marcus revved his shovel head first. The engine's roar, a defiant bellow against the thunder rolling in from the hills. its exhaust mingling with the earthy scent of wet soil rising from the fields. "Town hall's next," he shouted over the din, wiping rain from his beard, his voice carrying the steady resolve of a man who'd stared down worse tempests in forgotten battlefields. The crew mounted up in a fluid motion, practiced as breathing, their leathers darkening under the assault, chrome dulled to a somber gleam. Clara hesitated at the edge of the group, her apron sodden and clinging like a second skin, but she climbed onto the back of a spare bike behind one of the younger Vipers, a wiry veteran named Tyler, whose steady hands guided her without a word. Ethan settled in front of Noah once more, the boy's salute to the mill, a final gesture to his father's hidden fight, brief but poignant, fist to brow amid the cascade. They rode out in tight formation, tires churning through puddles that splashed like accusations, the convoy cutting a path back toward Willow Creek's heart. The deputy's cruiser trailed at a cautious distance, its wipers slashing rhythmically against the windshield, Badge Harlan's silhouette hunched over the wheel, radio crackling with urgent dispatches that echoed faintly over the storm. Victor Lang had peeled away in his sedan earlier, tires spinning mud as he fled toward whatever allies he could muster, his parting glare a promise of retaliation veiled in bluster. Noah felt the weight of the ledgers in his mind more than in his hands now, pages that mapped not just corruption, but the quiet erosion of trust that had claimed Jake Harlan, turning a brother's protection into a solitary burden. The town hall squatted at the end of Main Street, a squat brick building with flags drooping limp in the rain, its windows glowing faintly against the grey afternoon like hesitant beacons. The Vipers pulled up in a staggered line, engines cutting off one by one until the only sound was the patter of rain on helmets and the distant rumble of thunder. Noah dismounted, helping Ethan down, the boy's sneakers squelching in a puddle that reflected the overcast sky like a fractured mirror. Clara followed, her steps uncertain, the letter from Jake now tucked safely in her pocket, its words a compass she'd ignored for too long. "I never knew the full of it," she murmured to Noah as they approached the steps, water dripping from her hair in rivulets. "Jake tried to tell me once about the Mills games, how Victor twisted the deals to squeeze us dry. I shut him out, called him reckless. But you're keeping his word alive." Noah's response was a nod, his jaw set against the chill seeping through his vest. The scent of ozone sharp in the air. "Promises like that don't die easy, Mum. They pull you back no matter the miles." Inside, the lobby hummed with the low buzz of fluorescent lights and the murmur of clerks shuffling papers, the air stale with the mustiness of old files and cooling coffee from a nearby urn. Badge Harlan burst through the doors moments later, shaking off rain like a dog, his uniform darkened and clinging, face twisted in a mix of frustration and calculation. "You can't just waltz in here with wild claims," he barked, blocking the hallway to the commissioner's office, his hand gesturing vaguely toward the lockbox peeking from Noah's vest. "This is official business. Evidence chain warrants the works." The Vipers spread out subtly, a protective cordon that drew stares from the few employees milling about, their footsteps echoing on the linoleum like hesitant drum beats. Ethan stayed close, his small hand finding Clara's for the first time, a bridge forged in the storm's wake. Marcus leaned against a bulletin board plastered with faded notices, community events, lost pet flyers, the irony not lost on him as he eyed the deputy. Official, like the official skim on road funds that left Jake's guardrail a death trap. "We've got the receipts, Harlan. Your cousin's name's all over 'em." The words landed like pebbles in a still pond, rippling outward as a door creaked open down the hall. Commissioner Ellis emerged, a gaunt man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses fogged from the humidity, his tie askew as if the rain had unraveled his composure. Victor Lang hovered behind him, face pale under the harsh lights, the oil-slick confidence stripped away. "What's this commotion?" Ellis demanded, voice thin but authoritative, glancing at the group with the wariness of a cornered fox. Noah stepped forward, pulling the ledgers free, water droplets beading on the covers like unshed tears. He laid them on the reception desk with deliberate care, the pages fanning slightly to reveal stamped signatures and damning figures. This, Commissioner. Proof your office signed off on ghost contracts while Willow Creek's roads crumbled. Jake Harlan found it, tried to blow the whistle. Next day, he's gone. The room fell into a charged hush, broken only by the relentless drum of rain against the windows, each drop amplifying the tension coiling in the air. Clara's breath caught, her grip on Ethan's hand tightening as memories flooded back. Jake's late-night calls, his frustration over crooked ledgers that bled the family dry, funding Victor's expansions while her own home sagged under leaks. He wasn't reckless, she said, voice gaining strength directed at Ellis. He was trying to fix what you all broke, for us, for the town. Ethan nodded beside her, his eyes meeting the Commissioner's without flinching, the salute unspoken but present in his straight-backed stance. Badge shifted, his earlier bluster deflating as the ledger's implications sank in, the radio on his belt falling silent, as if even the lines of authority recoiled. Victor sputtered protests, but Ellis held up a hand, scanning the documents with growing pallor, the fluorescent hum underscoring his labored swallows. This needs verification, he stammered, but the doubt in his eyes betrayed him, the moral fracture widening under the weight of exposed truths. Noah watched, the Vipers a silent testament behind him, their loyalty not in shouts but in the unyielding presence that demanded justice without a fist raised. As the Commissioner retreated into his office, murmuring about audits and investigations, the group lingered in the lobby, the rain easing to a soft patter outside, sunlight piercing the clouds in tentative rays that gilded the wet pavement. Ethan looked up at Noah, a quiet smile breaking through, the first real one since the gas station days. Dad would be proud. You kept the promise. Noah ruffled the boy's damp hair, the gesture simple, profound, a thread in the tapestry of chosen family weaving tighter. But shadows lingered. Victor's glare promised pushback, and Badge's uneasy stance hinted at deeper entanglements yet to surface. The road to full redemption stretched ahead, paved with ethical storms, but for now, the Vipers had planted their flag in the heart of corruption, honoring Jake's ghost with every step forward. Clara pulled Ethan aside as the crew gathered near the doors, the air lighter now, carrying the faint, hopeful scent of rain-washed earth. I'm sorry, kid, for shutting you out, for not seeing what Jake saw in you. The boy hugged her fiercely, the embrace a seal on fractured bonds, while Noah felt the pull of the horizon. The next ride would demand more than evidence. It would test the soul of their oath, binding them against the gathering dark of institutional deceit. The engines waited outside, ready to roar once more, carrying whispers of justice through the storm-cleared streets of Willow Creek. The lobby of the town hall felt smaller now, the air thick with the lingering dampness of the storm and the sharper edge of confrontation, like the tang of polished brass under tension. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that danced across the linoleum floor, where puddles from their boots spread like unspoken accusations. Noah Kane stood at the center, the lockbox's weight a steady anchor against his side, its contents laid bare on the reception desk, ledgers splayed open, pages curling slightly in the humidity, ink stark as fresh wounds. Ethan's small frame pressed close to Clara's leg, his eyes flicking between the adults, the boy's quiet vigilance a mirror of the resolve that had drawn the Vipers here, mile after unforgiving mile. Commissioner Ellis retreated into his office with a hurried shuffle, the door clicking shut behind him like a held breath, but not before Victor Lang's voice sliced through the hush, oily and edged with desperation. This is a setup, fabricated nonsense from a dead man's grudge. Victor paced near the windows, rain-streaked glass blurring the outside world into a watercolor of grey streets and gleaming bikes. His tailored shirt rumpled now, sweat tracing lines down his temples. Badge Harlan hovered by the door, radio in hand, his earlier authority fraying like the edges of those damning receipts, fingers twitching as if debating whether to call for reinforcements or bolt. Clara's hand rested on Ethan's shoulder, a tentative claim born from the storm's raw honesty, her voice emerging soft but unyielding as she faced Victor. Jake wasn't grudge-holding. He was the one holding things together. You squeezed the mill dry, diverted funds meant for the town, for roads that could have saved him. Her words hung in the air, pulling at the threads of her own regrets, memories of Jake's late-night visits flashing like lightning. Him under the hood of her old truck, grease-streaked hands fixing what she couldn't afford, never asking for thanks, just a nod of shared blood. Ethan looked up at her, a spark of connection igniting in his gaze. The family he'd saluted in shadows, now standing solid before him. Noah met Victor's glare steadily, the biker's broad shoulders squared against the wall of institutional deceit, the faint scent of wet leather mingling with the stale coffee aroma from the urn in the corner. "Your games end here, Lang." Jake pieced this together, quiet, like he did everything. No fanfare, just truth for the boy and anyone else you bled dry. The Vipers remained a silent bulwark, Marcus leaning against a pillar with arms crossed, his shovelhead's keys jingling softly in his pocket like a countdown, while Tyler scanned the hall's exits, ever the sentinel. Their presence wasn't threat, it was testament, the chosen kin who'd ridden through fire for less, bound by oaths that outlasted rust and rain. Badge cleared his throat, stepping forward with a forced bluster that rang hollow against the lobby's echo. "Commissioners reviewing it. Could take days, weeks. You can't just storm in with biker fairy tales and expect the system to bend." But his eyes darted to the ledgers, the figures blurring under scrutiny. 10,000 here for phantom repairs, another 5 vanishing into Victor's expansions, all while Willow Creek's infrastructure crumbled, guardrails unchecked until that fatal twist in the road. Noah caught the deputy's unease, a flicker of conscience buried under years of looking the other way, perhaps kin to the small-town blindness that let corruption root deep. From Ellis's office came muffled voices, rising and falling like distant thunder. The commissioner on the phone, words clipped. "Yes, sir? Discrepancies? Need to verify." Victor paced faster, his polished shoes squeaking on the floor, the air growing heavier with the weight of unraveling alibis. Ethan shifted, his small voice cutting through like a clear note in fog. "Dad said promises fix what's broken. You broke a lot, but we can mend it." The simplicity struck Clara, drawing a sharp intake of breath, her free hand brushing the crumpled letter in her pocket. Jake's plea for unity, inked in haste before the roads claimed him. Marcus pushed off the pillar, his gravelly tone drawing eyes. "We've got copies scanned on the CB network, Vipers from here to the border. If this drags, it goes wide. No more shadows." The threat was ethical, a floodlight on the rot, and Victor halted, face draining to ashen, the realization dawning that Jake's network, scattered brothers in garages and truck stops, could amplify one boy's salute into a chorus. Badge radioed quietly then, not for backup, but for the state auditor, his voice laced with reluctant integrity, the static crackling like fractures in his resolve. Sunlight pierced the clouds outside, slanting through the windows in golden shafts that warmed the cooling puddles, illuminating dust motes swirling like liberated secrets. Ellis emerged at last, glasses perched low on his nose, a folder clutched under his arm, preliminary notes already cross-referenced against county records. "Irregularities confirmed," he announced, voice thin but official. Avoiding Victor's pleading stare. "An investigation launches immediately. Ms. Harlan, the boy's placement is suspended pending review. Family ties take precedence." Clara's knees buckled slightly, but she steadied, pulling Ethan into a hug that enveloped him fully, the embrace a dam, breaking years of distance. Victor slunk toward the exit, muttering of lawyers and appeals, but the fight had leached from him, leaving a hollow shell under the relentless light. Badge nodded curtly to Noah, a grudging respect in his eyes, the first crack in the Badger's armor, hinting at his own path toward amends. The Vipers gathered their things, the lockbox secured, engines calling from the lot like old friends ready to ride. Noah knelt to Ethan's level, the boy's face alight with the dawn of possibility. "Your dad's watching, kid. Salutes all around." Ethan grinned, fist to brow in return, the gesture rippling through the crew, a wave of quiet honor that bound them tighter. As they stepped into the clearing air, the scent of fresh earth rising, Clara walked beside Noah, her steps surer. "Thank you. For riding back, for keeping the word." The convoy formed up, tires humming on damp asphalt, Willow Creek unfolding before them not as a cage, but a crossroads. Yet shadows lingered. Victor's connections ran deep, and the investigation would unearth more thorns, tests of loyalty that could fracture even the strongest oaths. Noah mounted his chief, Ethan secure behind him, the horizon stretching wide under a sky washing clean. Redemption wasn't a single ride. It was the endless road of promises fulfilled, one truthful mile at a time. The sun dipped toward the horizon as the Viper's convoy rolled out of Willow Creek, engines humming a low, triumphant dirge against the fading light, the air crisp with the scent of sun-baked earth and lingering rain. Noah Kane led the pack, his Indian chief steady under him, Ethan's small arms wrapped secure around his waist, the boy's cheek pressed to the leather that still held the faint, comforting musk of the day's battles. Behind them, Clara rode pillion with Tyler, her posture easing for the first time in years, the wind tugging at her damp hair like an invitation to let go. The town shrank in their mirrors, its squat buildings blurring into a silhouette of reclaimed shadows, the ledger's truths now echoing through official channels. Audits launched, Victor Lang's empire cracking under the weight of subpoenas that arrived like thunderclaps by late afternoon. They'd lingered just long enough at the town hall for Ellis to sign the provisional papers, his hand shaking as he stamped the forms, suspending Ethan's placement, affirming Clara's custody with a clause for ongoing support from the club's network. "Family's what we make it," the commissioner had muttered, avoiding Noah's gaze, the fluorescent hum underscoring his capitulation. Badge Harlan had stood by, silent now, his radio clipped to his belt like a relic of overreach. A nod exchanged with Noah hinting at his own quiet reckoning. Perhaps a report filed against Victor by dawn, the first step in shedding the town's corrupt skin. Victor himself had vanished into the twilight, his sedan kicking up gravel as he fled toward distant lawyers, but the Vipers knew roads like his always circled back, and justice once stirred didn't settle easy. The ride wound through the hills, flanking Route 17, the same path where Jake had met his end, golden light slanting across the asphalt in warm shafts that painted the chrome accents on the bikes like liquid fire. Ethan lifted his head, the wind whipping his hair, and pointed to a familiar stretch, the curve where the guardrail now gleamed fresh, replaced overnight by county crews scrambling to cover tracks. "They fixed it," he said, voice carrying over the roar, a mix of awe and finality threading through. Noah glanced back, his silver-threaded beard catching the breeze, eyes softening under the brim of his cap. "Yeah, kid, your dad's push did that. Promises like his echo louder than engines." They pulled off at a roadside overlook as dusk deepened, the sky a canvas of indigo streaked with the last embers of sunset, the distant hum of cicadas rising like a chorus to their arrival. The Vipers dismounted in a loose circle, boots crunching on gravel strewn with wildflowers that released a sweet, earthy perfume underfoot. Marcus built a small fire from gathered twigs, flames crackling to life, with pops that mirrored the sparks of reconnection flickering among them. Clara sat on a weathered log, Ethan beside her, the boy leaning into her side as stories unfolded, not just of Jake's heroics, but of the fractures they'd all mended today. Tyler passed around a thermos of hot coffee, steam curling into the cooling air, its bitter warmth chasing away the chill of unresolved grief. Noah crouched near the fire, the glow casting flickering shadows across his scarred face, pulling the original letter from his vest once more. The paper, softened by handling, crinkled as he read aloud Jake's words. "Watch the boy, Cain. Teach him what brothers mean, the ones you choose, not the ones fate hands you." Ethan's eyes reflected the flames, wide and steady. The salute he'd offered so many strangers, now a badge of belonging, returned in full by the crew gathered around him. Clara reached for the letter, her fingers tracing the ink, tears carving silent paths down her cheeks. "I pushed him away after Dad's debts, thought the vipers were poison, but you showed me the antidote. Loyalty that sticks, no matter the storm." The group fell into a companionable quiet, the fire's warmth a balm against the encroaching night, stars pricking the velvet sky one by one like promises fulfilled. Marcus raised his mug in a toast, voice gravelly. "To Jake Harlan, mechanic rider father, and to Ethan, the salute that brought us home." Mugs clinked, a soft chime amid the night's hush. And Ethan stood, small but unbowed, snapping a crisp salute that rippled through the vipers. One by one they returned it, fists to brows, a thunderous wave of honor that bound them tighter than any chain, the gesture echoing Jake's lessons across the miles. As the fire died to embers, glowing like embers of a renewed legacy, Noah helped Ethan onto the bike, the boy's weight a light burden now, full of future rides. Clara mounted behind Tyler, her hand waving a final goodbye to the overlook, Willow Creek's lights twinkling far below like distant fireflies. A town forever changed, its corruption laid bare, justice's quiet victory etched into its ledgers and hearts. The convoy roared to life, engines harmonizing in the dark, headlights cutting swaths through the inky road ahead. They headed north towards scattered homes and waiting garages, but the bond they'd forged pulsed strong, a family chosen in the crucible of truth and loss. Miles later, under a canopy of stars that seemed to salute in turn, Ethan whispered against Noah's back, "Will we ride together again?" Noah's laugh rumbled low, vibrating through the handlebars. "Every chance we get, kid, that's the promise." And the wind carried them forward, scents of pine and freedom mingling with the exhaust, Willow Creek fading into memory, a chapter closed but the road eternal, paved with the honor of words kept and salutes returned. In the quiet courage of their ride, Jake's spirit thrummed alive, a legacy of redemption that outshone any shadow. Thank you for joining us on this journey of honor and unbreakable bonds. If these tales of chosen family and moral triumphs touch your soul, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. We'd love to have you ride with us on the next adventure.